Hey everyone, so look, hear me out. I'm going to say that right up front. Hear me out. I'm going to talk about my new set of actions. There's a whole suite of tools. It's called MaskLogic. And I really want to kind of explain it step by step, piece by piece, because I think it's one of those things that if you're used to making compound masks for different reasons, whether you're doing environmental photography or automotive or product or portraits, which is of course my specialty, regardless, if you're used to making masks, you probably are going to be excited by this because you're going to realize how efficient it is. If you're not used to making compound masks or doing a lot of more advanced masking, this could be a real, I don't want to say education for you, but probably will be a little bit of an education. So I want you guys to work with me here. I'm going to explain it in stages, and then we'll go into how we can use it in more advanced ways. And of course, talk about the helper actions, which are a bunch of cool presets. We're going to talk about those in a little bit. Those are over here. And there's a bunch of them that you can install or not install. But the very first thing I want to talk about in general, as we move towards the end of 2025, when it comes to NBP, I've been making a lot of really cool action suites, that have core function actions and then helper actions. And I recommend to everybody to put, your actions palette in button mode. So these helper actions work, more efficiently. And so the actions are easier to just trigger in general. There's a lot of talk that I've been doing about how to use these actions in a manner that makes sense to you and is useful and practical to you. And one of the core things I want to get across is that not only are you capable of modifying these actions as needed, because of course they're actions, they're not locked down, but I recommend it. Now, if you don't want to go open up an action, come here, take it off button mode, and then start exploring what's inside these actions. You don't necessarily have to if you don't want to. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying you're missing out, but I'm saying you're welcome to, and I encourage it. Second, if you just want to delete some actions, like for example, this comes with two different action installs, all the helper actions below, which we'll talk about, and the core actions. You might not ever use the helper actions and think, I don't need those. Maybe you won't need this bank right here of actions, that do all the individual channels. Delete what you don't use. Keep a copy of everything, of course, somewhere. Keep the action file somewhere, but mix and match and keep what you need. Because some people tell me, I have all these cool actions and so many helper actions from NBP and I can't make sense of them all. Over time, you'll figure out what works for you, what you need and don't need. And I recommend uninstall or remove what you don't need, modify it. If you know how to do it, if you feel comfortable with it, run with it. You guys, basically, when you purchase actions from me, it's almost like just donations to allow me to keep running NBP and work on more advanced tools for everybody and updating existing tools as well. Let's talk about how I recommend starting out with NBP MaskLogic. So first of all, the channels palette is going to be a huge aspect of what we do with MaskLogic. Now, it's a huge aspect of what we do when we're building compound masks anyway. But if you haven't used your channels palette, not only is it generally tucked away here with layers and paths, at least in a lot of different, workflow layouts, but I recommend you put it on its own. So go to Window and go to channels and pop that open. Second, once it's open, at least until you get used to things so you can get a better visual of what's going on, I would take the options, the top right button here on channels, okay, and go to panel options and put it on the largest thumbnail size right there, which is what this is on right now. This is going to allow you to see a better visual of each thumbnail so you can see what the masks that we're building look like at a glance. Over time, you'll know what they do, and you won't need to necessarily have the thumbnails that big. You might not even have to have the channels window open. But for now, I recommend it because then we can see what it does. Now, speaking of what it does, let's go ahead and open up or focus on this image here, which I've used a lot of this set from my friend Ryan Pramick. And we're going to create a bunch of different masks that potentially can be useful to us, right? So we have two main actions that you run first. Everything else you run after it. Well, not everything else. The helper actions you can run after it, right? And I'll walk you through all of it. But we have two core action banks. That's what I call them. We have NBP, look up here, NBP Core Mask Bank. And then underneath there, two below that, NBP Portrait Mask Bank. Portrait Mask is going to include some other automated Adobe AI masking, including lips and eyes and hair and things like that. And of course, the other one does not include that. So we don't have faces and hair and wardrobe and arms and stuff on this shot. So that's why we have two different actions, because they have to create a lot of masks. And because they use so much Adobe AI, it can take a minute. And that's the first thing I want to mention. When you create let's go for this first one, the Core Mask Bank. When you run that, it's going to give you a little bit of a warning and say, okay, look, any warning dialogues that pop up saying something was not found or duplicate not available or no more than 50% is visible, just hit continue each time. The way the action is built is that it's going to do everything modularly. So if something doesn't work out, like if it looks for a sky and can't find a sky, it'll come back and give you a not found. And that's fine. You hit continue. And if it gives you 2 or 3, you hit continue each time. When it's done, you'll have a bank of masks that are related to everything that it could find. These aren't errors. The action isn't breaking. It's just Photoshop hard-coded with letting you know, hey, what you're asking for, I can't do. But again, the way the action is built, it can still go forward and do everything it needs to do without necessarily, crashing, as it were. So when you run the first one, which is a core mask bank on my computer, 5-year-old MacBook on about 22, 21 to 40 megapixel images, 16-bit, I'm seeing this one run about 25 to 30 seconds. Okay. The portrait one takes upwards of a minute, but the benefit of running these up front is that you have all these mask banks built into the actions window. And then since they're all there as separate, in the channels window, since they're all there as separate channels, we can call them instantly. So once we build this up front, we can have immediate, literally instant access to so much. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. Like I said, this one, I've been testing. It takes about 20 to 30 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and fast forward, but I'm going to go ahead and run it now, and you'll see how the channels start showing up. All right, so that one actually took about 15 seconds or so. Let's see what's going on. Again, if you're familiar with creating channels for, to hold your masks in a repository, then you know what this is about. But if you're not used to this, let me explain what's happening. So when you have your channels palette open, channels window, of course, it shows you your RGB composite. That's what the 3 channels coming together to make your master image look like. And then, of course, you can look at the red, green, and blue channels. Those are cool, but not what we're doing today. That's not what MaskLogic is about. So what are we doing? Well, we can have additional channels in our channels window in any document. Okay. And these channels can be useful for many things, but right now we're using them to house and like I said, like a repository of different masks. And it's not just to have them at the ready. That's benefit 1. We can have them immediately. For example, the subject mask masks out the car easily. The background mask, clearly an inverted version of that. The sky mask, that's Photoshop AI as well. We have a saturation mask, okay? That's done with actual a chroma method. So it's not what I like to call a false positive of saturation. It's actually true saturation, irrespective of luminosity. So all that means for you is that you get a better representation of what the saturation is looking like. And keep in mind too, as a reminder, when we're talking about masks, white means this is the selection and black means it's not the selection, and any gray in between means it blends, right? So this is the car completely selected and not the background at all. This is the background selected and not the car at all. As you can see on the sky mask per the Adobe AI, it's kind of blended in, assuming that skies have a glow to them. So it tries to account for that, right? That's AI. Now the saturation mask, again, the brighter areas, the white areas, denote more saturation. And we can see that. You can see these bright reverse lights here. When we go to the shot, there's intense red in the brake lights, in the reverse lights, So because of that, that's what a saturation mask is very useful for. And we're going to go over why saturation masks are important. Now, we have a general highlights mask, which for the most part looks like a high contrast black and white version of the image. We have a midtones mask, which focuses on a broader range of midtones. And we have a shadows mask, which for the most part looks like an inverted version of the image. Now, these masks in and of themselves are useful. So let's say, for example, we're going to go back to the RGB, and let's say we want to select a car real quick. Okay, normally we can go select subject, and that's cool, but it has to run it every time. So by building this bank up front, we don't have to do that. We can have the channels window open, which is why I recommend that we do, and we can hold down Command or Control on a PC, Command on Mac, hold down Command or Control, and click the thumbnail of the subject mask, for example. You see how when I do that, click the button, that little icon, the little graphic of a capture box, if you will, is right next to the finger. So if I hold down Command or Control and click the subject mask channel, now I have a subject mask and I can do anything with it. So if I came to curves with that selection running, now I have a curves layer with that mask of the car. So if I can brighten and darken, this is pretty common stuff, right? And of course, the opposite's true. If I Command or Control click the background channel, then I have the background immediately available. if you're going to work with these masks regularly in your workflow, whether you know that answer or not, you might figure out that, hey, I need the subject mask of the car and the background with some frequency throughout my workflow. Many editors will create banks of these in their channels to have them at the ready, so they don't have to reprocess the subject AI every single time. So you just save it in there. So with that same logic, MaskLogic has created the most common, in my opinion, mask that people need. We have the sky, we have the subject and background, of course, and then the other ones that I mentioned. That's cool. We can call them at any moment. So I can be in my RGB and I go, oh, I want to brighten the sky. So Command or Control click the sky channel, which has a mask on it, and then I go to curves, for example, and I can control the sky immediately. That right there, already a benefit and pretty common. However, the key here is being able to blend these masks into different selections, right? And some people, of course, are really talking lately, as of November of 2025, they're talking about Capture One's compound masking, the Boolean methods to add, subtract, and intersect masks. Very useful, especially in the raw front. And I'm a huge Capture One user, love Capture One, so I'm very excited and I've been enjoying that aspect of their masking. Well, we've been doing that in Photoshop for a long time. So for example, let's talk about really fast ways that you can benefit from compound mask quickly, okay? Let's say you look at the shot and you go, all right, what I need to do is brighten and maybe add a little contrast to everything except the car and except the sky. Okay, well, how do we do that? Well, let's see. So we need everything, so that's the background, but we also not need the sky. We want the background, not the car, and not the sky. Okay, a couple of different ways that we can sort of build that idea, right? So let's talk about this. Let's say we start with what we know we want most of. This is just one way to do it. Hold down Command or Control, click the background. We know we want that. So we're going to go ahead and create a curves with that selection. And now we have curves set up with the background, but we don't want the sky. So one thing we can do is we can Command or Control click the sky. And when we go to that mask of that curves we just created, we can invert, or to be more specific, we can fill with black as our foreground color to make sure that we're not including the sky in this mask, right? One way to fill with the foreground color is Option or Alt Delete. Option Delete. Now we fill with black. Let's take a look at that mask by holding Option or Alt and clicking it. What do we have? Exactly what I described earlier. We have the background, not the car, and not the sky. So now, when we brighten or darken, we're brightening or darkening everything that is not the sky or the car. And that is a compound mask. In this case, we're using an add function. We're adding two masks together. Really, we're taking the whole entire image and we're subtracting two chunks of it, but you can look at it as an add. We're taking two different sections, right? So you might think, oh, that's kind of cool, I guess. What if I did one at a time? You could absolutely do one at a time. There's nothing wrong with that. You can have a curves layer for the background and the curves layer of just the background. Then you can have another one masking out the sky in a different way. There's so many different ways you can go about building a compound mask. And that's the most obvious sort of two sections of the image I didn't want included. I happen to have these built-in channels right here that we created up front, and I can call them as needed. But we can still do more complicated ones as well. So let me explain how we can use a compound mask, even by grouping an adjustment layer into itself. This is a fast way, though not necessarily the most streamlined way, but it's still pretty fast. Let me explain. Let's say you want the saturation of the subject, in this case, the car. A couple of things we can do. Let's go ahead and Command or Control click our subject. There it is. We're going to put out a vibrance adjustment layer because we want to be able to modify the vibrance and saturation of the car. But we don't want to just do the entire set of pixels of the subject, in this case, the car. We want just the saturation mask. So one thing we can do is group it. Command or Control G right now. We have a group with just one adjustment layer in it. Then we Command or Control click the saturation mask, and on that group, we create mask in the layers window. Now we have the vibrance with the subject mask, and then we have the group of it, which is just the vibrance, and it has a saturation mask. The upshot is that if I increase saturation now, I'm going to go ahead and max it out for the video. Off and on, off and on. We're filtering one mask through another, and that's that compound mask. We're creating an intersection of the mask, but we're doing it in a separated manner. This can have its benefit depending on what you're trying to do, because right now you can technically add more inside that group if you want. to do other things. You can increase the saturation or the hue, maybe only affecting the saturation, and it can have its own mask, or you can also use the subject mask. This kind of compound masking situation is actually fairly common when we want to be able to set something up and then be able to make changes. If you just want to boost the saturation of the car, there's a lot of ham-fisted ways you can do it. But when you really want to be particular, this is one example. You don't want to increase the neutral hues in here, right? We have a lot of neutral grays, a lot of neutral whites or light grays. We don't want that, but we want to be able to increase it without increasing everything. So for example, if I hold down Shift and then click the mask on the group, that adds saturation to everything. I'm temporarily turning off that mask. And as you can see, we get a false positive that's just too much. So we can click it again with Shift down, and now we're only off and on, off and on. We're only increasing saturation via the saturation mask of the group and also via the mask of the subject on the vibrance. You see that? Can you imagine the many different things that you can do? Let's talk about that for a minute. Let's delete this. Let's go to our background. Now we're going to create a curves with that. There it is. You notice how I command or control click the background, and now I have that mask. I'm going to group it, and then I'm going to go to highlights mask. Command or control click the highlights mask and create a mask with that selection on the group. Now when I brighten, I'm only brightening or darkening the highlights of the background. And as you can see, if you're like, I want more drama in my background, but I don't want to miss the highlights of the car. Look how powerful that is. And why is it important to have that flexibility of a mask adjustment layer inside a group with another mask? And that's so you can have flexibility. You can constantly keep changing as maybe you close that out, and that's your highlight boost of the background, right? And then you keep color grading on top of that with other layers. Over time, you might think, you know what? It's a little too strong. It's not strong enough. And you can scale it back and forth, and you have that flexibility at any moment to do whatever you need to do. And in fact, while you're sitting here, you can also be like, oh, okay, you know what? I want to add a photo filter of blue across the whole thing. I'm affecting the car, so I'm going to hold down Alt Option and drag this mask from my curves over, and it's going to copy it over. It usually will give you a warning, but I've already told it not to show that again. So now I've masked out the car on curves and the car on photo filter, so I can increase photo filter if I wanted to, adding a lot of blue to only the highlights while brightening only the highlights. You see how all this works? Creating these really clean, because I mean, I reduced the resolution of this shot for the video, but it's an extremely high res shot. And all these masks are super clean because they're created from the image itself. You're not brushing in things and hoping, right? You're creating these from itself. Now, keep in mind too, when you have all this kind of control and you have all these AI things, we're always at the mercy of AI. So if AI completely, let me just delete all that. If the Adobe AI completely botches the subject mask, that's unfortunate. But sometimes it happens, more so on people than anything else. But sometimes it'll be like, here's the car and a chunk of pavement for no reason. Well, keep in mind, this channel is just pixels, and you can come in carefully or however you want. Yeah, you can paint on it if you want. You can paint and clean it up if you want. You can create a selection and add to it. This is common sort of channel mask creation modification. So don't be scared that this is permanent. You can clean it up a little bit if you want to, okay? If you needed to get rid of the side view mirror, you can just clean that off. And granted, there's also the background as well, so you have to consider that. But it's just pixel data, and you can modify it to create these raster masks any way that you need to modify them, okay? For example, on the highlights mask, you can hit Command or Control L, and you can darken a little bit more to just get the tighter highlights if you wanted to. This is basically endless, but the idea is to mix and match these masks, right? So that's kind of like the quick way, or one of the quick ways to do it. But keep in mind, we have other things we can do too. Let's say we think, I want the sky and the car. Well, we don't have to necessarily build a layer and then a group of it. We can do it like this. Hold down Command or Control, click the car. Now, hold down Command or Control and Shift and click the sky. And now you've selected both of those, okay? Then you can come in here and say curves. And now we're brightening the car and the sky. Now you might think, neat, but I only want to brighten the highlights to add some contrast. Cool. Hold down Command or Control, click the highlights, group it, add a mask. You see what I did there? See how fast that was? This is the highlight controller. This is the actual areas that we selected. That was our additive kind of function. And now we brighten, and we're only brightening the highlights of the car or darkening, brightening the highlights of the car and the sky for that little bit of highlight pop. which in this case, I think looks kind of cool. I'm not trying to say that Ryan's shot needs any modification because it's a final image, but you see how fast I did that, right? Really, really fast things like, okay, hold down Command or Control and just click the midtones. Done. Now I have the midtones and I can put, I don't even know. Let's just put a photo filter on it. Cool. And now we can choose sort of a warm tone on the midtones, right? As opposed to if I hold down Shift and turn off the actual mask, now the whole thing is warm. That's nice. But what if I wanted just the midtones? In this case, it adds some warmth to the shot. Or if I didn't want warmth, I could say cooling filter. That might be a little strong. Scale it back. And now I've cooled off the midtones. These are very useful masks and you have them available right here. But speaking of that, we also have these options down below here. Saturation selection, highlight selection, midtones, and shadows. So if your channels isn't even open, if you don't have that window open, that's okay. You can just at any moment just be like highlights, done. There it is. You got your highlights, right? Or you can go midtones or you can go shadows. It immediately targets the channel and creates a mask from it automatically. As long as your action is on button mode, it'll do it in a single click. Okay, saturation selection, done. And it's a good opportunity for me to mention this. A lot of times when you call saturation or when it creates a saturation mask on the initial channel bank build out, it'll yell at you. Remember I told you about that. It might have a warning and say, hey, no more than 50% is visible. Don't worry about it. Hit OK and understand that that selection is running. For example, if I hit saturation selection or Command and Control click saturation mask, very little is being shown here because the saturation is so subdued. Especially on a shot that's not a final shot, you're going to have very subdued saturation and you're going to get that warning that says no more than 50% visible. You're going to get it a lot and it's just Photoshop and I can't turn it off. You can't turn it off. So it's a common thing people want to be able to override, but you can't. Don't worry about it. When that happens, just know, hey, it's okay. The saturation mask is active and running. And now if I choose, for example, curves, I have a curves on the saturated areas, if that's for some reason something I wanted to do. So just keep that in mind. Any selections that pop up that are not obvious, you might get that dialogue, but it's not the end of the world. But having this available immediately to you. So for example, you can just be like, okay, well, I'm going to select the subject and I'm going to add, what am I going to add? I think I'll add a brightness and contrast. And then I want to choose the shadows and I want to group that and add a mask. So now I'm adding brightness and contrast only to the shadows of the car. Extremely subtle difference, but you can see how I'm adding contrast or reducing it just to the shadows of the car. Who knows what different directions you can do. And the mask can go in the opposite directions as well. Don't get me wrong. So you can choose, for example, highlights and then create curves and then group it and then choose the car and then create a mask for that. And now you're brightening on the curves, using curves to brighten. And you start with the mask of the curve being the highlights. And then of course, it's all completely cut out by the group of, by the mask of the group. Okay. I know this all seems, redundant. If you've done this a lot, if it's something that you normally do, but if it's something new to you, understand that this is a lot of the ways that we go about creating masks. Now, before we, continue on to, well, actually, there's going to be another video I've decided for the portrait. But before we finish here, I want you to know that there's different ways to go about leveraging the tool set. So if you make your core mask bank and you think that's cool, you have all these buttons available to you. Okay, especially the saturation, highlights, midtones, and shadows. Now, these individual ones create a mask using mostly Adobe AI, but also my methods as well. When you don't have that, or when you know what, I only want a few. Now, speaking of what do I want and don't want, naturally, you can click on any channel you don't want and delete it. You can hit the delete little icon down here in the bottom of the channels window. But another quirk about Photoshop is that you can't mass delete channels. It's annoying. You can if you select each one while holding down Shift and click on every single one. So if you hold down Shift and click every single one and then hit delete, they all go away. That can be a little tedious. And the only reason why I recommend you may want to delete these is that if you save your PSD layered files, these are just adding bulk. You may need them later, so keep them if you do, but they're just adding extra pixel data, and that could just be a bigger file than you're used to. But if you're doing mega composites that are going to be PSBs anyway, it may not be a big deal for you, but just understand that these are taking up space. Probably not the end of the world, but you can get rid of them. And if you need to get rid of them quickly, that's why we have Purge mask channels. This one is directly related to this one, and this one is related to the portrait one, right? If you hit this, you get another warning. You might get delete not available, select not available. This is just Photoshop's quirks letting you know that, hey, some masks weren't created And if we try to delete them, it's not going to work. Or rather, it can't find those. But everything will still be okay, right? The action will still delete the appropriate mask. So hit continue. Okay, in this case, none of the channels that were there were unavailable, so they all just got deleted. It's just a quick way of doing it. If I hit NBP Core Mask Bank again and hit continue, now it has to do all the AI thinking again. And I'm going to go ahead and talk you through it so you can see how long it takes even while I'm recording. But by doing this up front, or even after you've done maybe your core cleanup and you're like, okay, now I'm ready to do some stylization, and see, it's already done. Some stylization, some highlighting, and some color grading. Now you have these channels available to you to build masks immediately. So you can go, okay, let's go to shadows. And I'm going to go to color lookup, and I'm going to choose one of these LUTs that I created, Cosmic Pop, whatever. And now I'm adding this color lookup just to the shadows. See how fast that was? And I have a cool grade. And I don't necessarily have to do the entire image. If I hold down Shift and turn it off, that's cool on the whole image, but maybe I just want it on the shadows. You see how fast we can work by having these available to us. So we can choose highlights and then immediately choose the levels. And then we can brighten the highlights of the entire image if we felt like we wanted to. Right? And if we think to ourselves, yeah, you know what? I don't want to mess with the car. So what I want to do is Command or Control click the background, group it, and create a mask. There we go. And now I'm only adding brightness to the rest, of the image and not the car. See, off, on. And so we've gone from here to here. Very seamless, very beautiful, kind of refined look. And we did it with our existing mask bank. I hope that makes sense, because that's one of the most common things that I tend to do, usually in a per basis kind of situation, like as needed. But I've always thought to myself, man, sometimes I just want a bank of channels to work with, right? And you can do your own as well. You can add a channel and then you can mix and match with it as well. But command clicking or control clicking or creating these masks into groups and everything, that is one method and it works. There are destructive methods as well. So for example, if I went to the subject mask right here, and then I command or control clicked the sky mask, I have that available. If I were to be, while on the subject mask, if I fill that with white, now I have a mask or channel that shows, it can create a mask of the subject and the sky. But look, I've made it permanent. If that's okay, if that's what you want, cool. But you just understand you've changed your subject mask and you added to it. This is common when you're building a one-off mask and you just need to kind of blend some together. Very, very common. Absolutely not a problem. Just understand that if you change it, that's going to be what happens when you call it next time. Not the end of the world, usually. Now, there are other ways to do more advanced things. For example, we can use calculate, and that's this advanced button down here, okay? We didn't go over all of these other light blue ones because all I do is create individual channels in case you want just that, and you do, and you're like, I just need the skin, and I'm going to create the skin channel, and I'll do various things with it. And you can create a skin channel and maybe highlights, mix and match, and work together. Now, intersecting. When we intersect selections, it can be very, very powerful for us, but we need to understand, okay, what could that potentially mean for us? And is there a way to make it without a layer with a mask and then a group with a mask? And is there a way to not mess up my channels? There is. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So if I click on calculate, what it's going to do is going to open up calculations here with some things already preset. So I'm going to click on calculate advanced. Now, a couple of things that have been preset. For one, on the source 1 and source 2, both have been set to merged. All that means is just the image of what you're seeing. That's what it's doing. And the channel is currently gray. All that means is basically kind of the luminosity of the image. That's just to give you a general starting point. This is where the magic happens of our intersecting. So pay attention close. Here we go. The first thing I want to do, for example, let's say I want the subject. Cool. There's the subject and it's being blended with channel gray. In other words, the default that I had it on with the blending mode of multiply. Multiply here with the way these channels are made acts as an intersect function. An intersect calculation. So if I choose, instead of gray, if I choose saturation, now I'm getting a saturation mask of just the car. If I were to choose highlights, now I'm getting a highlight mask of just the car, the subject in this case, right? Or the midtones of just the car, or the shadows of just the car. If I come back up here to subject and I choose background, now I've got the shadows of just the background. And I can have the midtones of just the background, or maybe the highlights of just the background, or of course, the saturation of just the background. Now, of course, if I were to choose sky, what I'm doing is I'm creating an intersect of the background and the sky, and that just gives me the sky. So, we have to be logical about this, but at least you can pre-envision what you're about to get. So if I went, okay, how about the sky and just the saturation? That's a whole new intersect that does not exist in your channel bank. We have a sky mask, That's saturation based only. And then the result, I have it on default of selection. You could technically make a new channel out of it. You could technically make a new document. But if you just leave it on selection and say, I want the sky and I want the saturation of the sky, leave it on multiply blend mode, 100% opacity, and go. Now I have that selection. There's the warning I was telling you about that happens because it's very subtle. Hit OK. And now if I choose vibrance, for example, I have the saturation mask of just the sky. So if I boost saturation crazy, which is very subtle here, on, off, I'm adding saturation to the sky using a saturation mask. That does not exist in this channel bank. We created it with calculations. We can also do it with the layer stack that I told you about involving a group, but we can just calculate it. So we hit calculations and we can come back here and be like, okay, how about subject and shadows? There it is. I have just the shadows, hit OK. And then I can choose whatever, let's say a curves. I can brighten or darken the shadows of just the subject, just the car. And that is going to help us create our intersect. Now, technically, we can use calculate to create an addition, like we can add two masks together, but there's really no need to come to calculate for that because like I said, if you hold down command and choose sky mask and then hold down shift and command or control and click saturation mask, now you have a very unique mask. What we have here is a mask that has, I'm going to go to vibrance. We have a mask that has all of the sky and then the saturation of everything else. And that's why add works really, really well here, okay? So keep that in mind too, that we can build a mask just using the key commands as we feel we want. Now, the opposite is also true, sort of. So for example, if I choose the hold down command or control and I click background, right? Now I have the background selected. If I hold down command or control and then also option or alt, right, and click the sky, I remove the sky from my background. You see that? I can create this actively. Let me deselect that and start over. So we held command or control. Let's go, how about subject? And then I'm going to hold down option and command or alt and control, and I'm going to click shadows. What did I just do? I removed the shadows from the subject selection. How's that for interesting, right? And I go to curves, for example, it just doesn't matter what it is. And now I have a strange selection of just the subject without the shadows being emphasized. And who knows what that can be, how that can be useful for you, because you can brighten or darken without necessarily modifying the shadows as much. So that addition and subtraction can be done actively while you're looking at your channels. The intersections, probably a little bit easier to do the layer itself, the adjustment layer with a group, or use the calculate function. Like I said, these intersections are very useful. Background and midtones. And there's the midtones background done. It's on selection, leave it on multiply, hit OK. And if I go to like a photo filter again, now I can add like a midtone toning to the background and not the car, right? Keep in mind too, this is just a tool set to make things happen quicker. If you hold down Alt or Option and look at your mask, you can also modify it. It's just a Photoshop mask. It's nothing proprietary, right? So keep that in mind. That is the idea behind MaskLogic, is to be able to build these things quickly. So yeah, you can have your channels window open and command or control click and make things happen with them, right? Or you can just be like, oh, you know what? I want the saturation mask real quick. Done. There we go. Add vibrance with that selection. And now I can add tons of saturation to just the saturation mask. That's kind of cool. Keep in mind too, again, if I hold down Alt or Option, that mask is modifiable. So at any moment, normally when I modify a mask, I'll use levels, Command or Control L, increase the intensity of it if I want. Less of the lower saturation, more of the higher saturation. And now I've really, really boosted it. So it's just a mask. You can do anything with it. And you don't necessarily need to do that, but at the same time, you have that power because it's just Photoshop masking, like I said. So once it's good to go and you feel like you've done all the work you need to do, or you created the compound mask that you need, everything looks great, to finalize your image and really give it that positive look that you were really hoping for, or just one specific function, whether it's color grading, corrective, or a contrast boost or something like that, you just say purge mask channels, hit continue, they're gone, and you can keep going. You don't have to delete them, but you definitely can. Now I know that was a lot, but I hope it makes sense because this is just the beginning of what you can do with so many of these mask functions. So what if we want to work with these intersections, but we want the fastest, most commonly used ones once we build our channel bank? Okay, well, check this out. I have the channels closed right now, and I have no channels created. So I'm going to go ahead and hit NBP Core Mask Bank, hit continue, and I'm going to let those get created. It's just going to take, about 15 seconds or so like we've been doing, right? And then we're going to use the helper actions, because once these channels exist, these intersections can be done instantly. The calculate function is great when you want to do it custom, when you want to really have control in previews. But when we open up the rest of them, we have all these helper actions that can make things happen very, very quickly. Just to confirm, go to Window, Channels. There they all are. Okay. Well, we're not going to have them open right now because I want to show you don't have to, right? So we have subject, skin, background, sky, hair, wardrobe and accessories, eyes, mouth, hat. Obviously, a lot of those don't apply to the car, but let's say we want the subject highlights. See, that's an intersection. Well, those channels existing, we just tap subject highlights. Now we have them. Done. We go to curves and we start brightening and we have the subject highlights. See how fast that was? Right? And these things are instant. So I can go subject saturation, I can go subject highlights, I can go subject midtones, subject shadows, right? See how fast that is? How about just the sky? Cool. How about sky saturation? No more pixels, no more than 50% available. That's fine. It's there. It's selected. All right. Sky highlights, sky midtones, sky shadows. You see how this can be built so quick. Now, the rest of them, hair and eyes and mouth and hat, they don't account. But the very basics alone of just like background saturation, that's fine. No more available. Let's say I want to reduce the saturation of the background via a saturation mask to make it more muted, but not make it too gray. Very subtle effect, but totally possible. I'm going to delete that. Okay. I can go background highlights. Remember we did that earlier. Already have it selected immediate. So it's making these intersections immediately, so I can quickly make things happen. Again, you can tweak this if you want, and you can use the calculate function if you want to see these things in advance. But if you need it now and fast, I need the sky shadows. Cool, done. All right. And I'm going to shift the hue of the sky shadows and make the sky more of an indigo. Done. See how easy that was? And then I want, I don't know. I want the saturation, saturation of the background. Yeah. Okay. We'll take the whole background. We'll saturate that just a bit. I'm going to go to hue and saturation, make it a little stronger. There we go. Off and on. See that? So I'm shifting the sky and then I'm changing the saturation of the saturated areas just by clicking instant buttons. Okay. And don't forget, the ones up here also still function. If you just want the highlights real quick, that's the highlights of the entire image. Go to curves, brighten the highlights of the whole image, or darken it if you want. There it is, right? And like I said earlier, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. I have reduced the resolution of this shot, but I want to show you how clean all of these things are. So if you look at the sky, that mask being built off the image itself, as I change the hue, you can see how clean it is just on the shadows. Blends in quite nice. In fact, and you'll see it on the portraits as well, when we make changes just to the predominant luminosity range of a section, like hue changes or color grading or brightening or darkening, it looks better than just the entire sky. In fact, let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's say I'm going to delete all of this. Let's say I just choose sky, okay? And then I go to hue and saturation and I shift the hue. And that's fine. It looks cool. Everything is now that indigo, right? Turn that off for a minute. But let's say I choose sky saturation. That's fine. And I choose hue. And now when I change it, it's a lot more subtle, but it accounts for the neutrals being more neutral. That's a more subtle change than this, if for some reason you wanted it. Also, alternatively, we can say sky shadows like we did earlier. And then when we go to hue, and we shift the hue, we're shifting the deepest part of the sky because it's very dark, and we're making it a little bit more blue, but blending more into the natural highlights. So this is a direct shift. Everything is indigo. Using just a saturation makes a very subtle shift, but leaves it a little more realistic looking. This one makes a more dramatic shift, but still blends into the highlights. This is not color logic. This is just editing 101 when you think about how to make something look more real when you're trying to modify the hue or the brightness of something. But you can quickly access these sections very, very fast. So please watch the portrait one as well. Leave comments below. We're going to try to make a lot more videos about this concept in general. Again, it's not something that MaskLogic invented. It's just a way to leverage it in a more streamlined sort of way. You let the work happen up front by running the channel banks. Like I said, there's a different video for the portrait one. And then you can quickly access these things whenever you need the midtones, highlights, shadow selection, or scroll down here. Maybe not to the people one, right? Background highlights. So we can say subject midtones. We can quickly access these. And then, like I said, when we're done with them, deselect that. Purge mask channels, hit continue, and they're all gone. Very, very simple and very, very fast. It's just a matter of getting your head around it if you've never done this sort of thing. So again, please leave comments below or drop me an email, nbp@ninobatista.com. And thanks for watching.